Evening all, welcome to the next EMEA vBrownBag with myself, Greg Robertson. And on tonight's EMEA vBrownBag is Simon Eady. Simon will be covering introduction to vSphere components for the VCP track. Simon's actually very recently passed his VCP, so congrats to him for that. Yeah, and he's actually missing his VBeers at the moment to be on here, which is always well appreciated. So yeah, as per usual, guys, this has been recorded. I'll put up the recording later on, or actually probably tomorrow. Try and stick out a blog post around it, and then you can also download it from iTunes. And yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, stick them on. You can stick them on Twitter with the hashtag vBrownBag. You can, if you're on the call, you can stick it in the questions area, and I'll try ask Simon the questions. If you are on the call, this is Simon's first vBrownBag, so don't be too harsh on him. Everybody's always nice, but we'll just say that just in case, because I think he's nervous. But don't worry about that. And yeah, Simon's just found out that he's sharing his screen, so I think he's a bit nervous about that also. So without talking very much more, I'll hand over the presenter portion to Simon, and then Simon, the hour is yours.
Okay.
So, cool. Let me do that.
Okay, here we go. Can we all see that? Okay.
We can see, yeah, vBrownBag, VCP 550, episode 1 note.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Right, I'm going to try and work my way through this. We're going to sort of go over the key components at a top level today. In later sessions, as I know, if you have a look at the vBrownBag site, they're going to be focusing very much on the specifics and going into sort of more deep dives. So this is sort of a very generalistic, this is the components that hold everything together. Nothing more than that, so I'm trying to avoid going into any details so I don't, I suppose, steal any limelight from any future episodes. As you can see on my document here, I've linked various bits and pieces which I use just to collate some of the information I have. Some of it's a little bit older but still pertinent. You also have the vSphere edition, so just starting from the top with the VCP track. For those of you that are new to studying for it, you'll need to be aware of the licensing model and what features are and are not available. Things to look out for would be host profiles, for instance, and the fact that that's sort of in Enterprise Plus. So you need to be aware of the different versions. Obviously, VMware are constantly releasing new things, so they have the Essentials and the Essentials Plus. They have the Standard, Enterprise. I think Enterprise might have gone now. I can't remember immediately, but Enterprise Plus is certainly around, and that's kind of like the one to have with all the features. And then beyond that, although from my experience the VCP doesn't touch too heavily on it, that you've got the cloud suites, which then of course encompass a lot more of the products in one go. Yeah, so that we'll get started with that. The various licensing options, if you're not familiar with them, it's important to be familiar with them. There are a lot of features, certainly in the little versions, like the Essentials, they're stripped right back. I'm going to bring up a link now here if I can. This is going to be fun. And here we go. I was not expecting to do this. This is, here we go, comparing the kits. So you can see the Essentials kit. There's quite a lot of limitations there. It's not so much, you can see just the Essentials kit is just the hypervisor. There's no vMotion, high availability, data protection. So while there isn't an awful lot of questions on any of that, it's just a good example to see that, you know, there are marked differences between the different products. And as I mentioned before, something like host profiles, which can come up, is only available in Enterprise Plus and above. So we're going to move on now. Go back to the Word document here. Hosts. Okay. So it's a type 1 hypervisor. You'll get potential queries on that. The difference being, if you're not familiar, type 1 hypervisor is installed onto the bare metal, whereas a type 2 hypervisor, products like VMware Workstation or Fusion, if you're a Mac user, that's installed inside your existing operating system. So, you know, if you have Windows and you install Workstation, you can run different operating systems there, and with Fusion, the same drill there. And obviously there are various other offerings out there from Microsoft and so on. But yes, it's important to remember that the ESXi is a type 1 hypervisor. It's installed onto the bare metal. There are lots of ways to deploy it. Certain things you need to look out for are the limitations, what the minimums are, what they'd like you to have. It can be installed in different methods. So as I've sort of outlined briefly there, it can be installed via USB or via just a traditional CD. You can use auto-deploy. And there are lots of other methods that VMware offer. VCP doesn't go mad on it, but it does expect you to know certain things like that, because you can even boot from the CD, or rather from the USB. It talks about partition sizes, this kinds of things, and the limitations, what is there, what isn't there, that kind of thing. How am I doing, by the way, Greg? I'm trying not to waffle here, but
you're doing well. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can also, with some of the more modern servers now, if you're not familiar, if you've got older hosts or older kit where you're used to installing onto traditional SAS or SATA drives, you can now install onto SD cards. I haven't seen a question necessarily come up with that, but I think it probably will sooner or later, so it's worth thinking about that. Dell, for instance, which is kit that I use, they provide on their R720s, for instance, dual SD cards, so you've got a failover and a DR sort of option. So you can deploy ESXi just onto the SD card, so there's no need for any physical disks on the host. You can just use SD cards. Don't want to get too technical on that because that's not kind of the purpose, but it will whine at you once you've fired up ESXi because there's no persistent storage. But that, you know, if you're going to be using something like ESXi, you're likely to have some kind of network-based storage, whether it be via NFS or iSCSI or whatever.
Yeah. When people are installing on SD cards, just something for people to keep in mind. If you're installing an SD card or a USB stick, then your scratch partition can't be on there. You'd have to have a scratch partition sitting on a data store or somewhere else. Just a warning to people that might do that in production.
The other little gotcha, and this is only pertinent with my experience with Dells, if you want to install onto an SD card with a Dell, you need to get their custom ISO as well from their site, which is fairly easy to find. Because an out-of-the-box sort of ISO that you download from VMware isn't going to pick up those SD cards, which caught me out initially, and then I was like, I'm doing something wrong, and then sort of figured it out. But yeah, so that's something to work out and be aware of. So as I've got here in the notes here, review licensing options. It's really important to be aware of those features. You're going to get questions on that. So moving on a little bit from the hosts, let's talk a bit about vCenter. Now there are two offerings there. You've got the appliance and of course the installation onto Windows itself. There are marked differences on that, and you will get queried on it. The appliance now is a viable option to deploy in a production environment. It didn't used to be. It was more geared, they would say, we'd rather you just used it in a lab environment. That they kind of didn't support it. I think it was beyond 50 VMs and a couple of hosts. But now they support, I think it's up to 1,000 VMs and many hosts. So it's now it's a production-ready appliance. So people are using it, I use it, I know other people are using it, but it's important to know what doesn't come with the appliance. One of them is IPv6, so I'm sure everybody with their huge IPv6 estates that you probably don't have, that's something that doesn't come with VCSA. And linked mode. Those of you that may or may not be familiar with linked mode, it's essentially linking your vCenters together so you can manage them from a single pane of glass rather than having separate C# clients or going into different web clients to manage your vCenter. Those two are key. You're going to get queried on that potentially. Also, database types. Now, there are different database types. I haven't listed them typically, but I think it used to be the older one on DB2. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might be Postgres now. You're going to get queried on that. The default logins, things like that to remember. So for those of you well versed, there's I think is it Kendrick Coleman has a website with all of the default logins, which I think he keeps up to date regularly. I'll try and find that website a little bit later, where you get all the default logins for the different products that VMware have. That's something you're going to want to gen up on. Also, the default ports. Now, I know that there's a lot of ports on my blog. I've put up some diagrams that I've managed to grab from VMware. Some guys have put together some amazing PDF which shows all of the port and link architecture for vCenter and other things. You don't need to know them all. You just need to know the important ones. And it will actually ask you in some cases, you know, what isn't there or what isn't important, or if this happens, which port is it going to use. So you'll get questions on that. So it's important that you're aware of those sort of things like port 25, port 80, those kinds of things. Nothing really erroneous well beyond that. So you don't need to get too stressed on that. Be aware of the system requirements as well for it. I think with the Windows generally it's sort of 8 gig, that kind of thing, but without bringing up the documentation, I can't think of off the top of my head. Those you get questions on that as well. Okay, moving on. I hope I'm not rushing too much. So data stores. Okay. I essentially just went and grabbed, sorry, let's get this into view properly. I went and grabbed this from the VMware site because I wanted it to be absolutely correct as to how they view them. So you need to be aware of what a data store is, the file system, what these ESXi, vSphere supports. So you can see there, you know, you've got you can essentially get a data store. You can have it locally stored on your server. So let's say you're in your home lab. You can have it deployed on your local disks if you want. The gotcha there is obviously unless you're running vSAN, it's not shareable storage. So you can't move VMs around in that context. But if you're really stuck and you just want to get it up and running and have a nose around the console, it's an option. But data stores, let's have a look here. Yeah, the data stores essentially, as you can see with what I've got up on the document there, logical containers. So you can put your VMs in there. You can order the data stores exactly how you want. You'll get. I don't want to get into something that isn't so VCP related, but you'll always get the people talking about should I have small data stores, lots of data stores, or one big data store, that kind of thing. But the great thing about the data stores is they're entirely up to you, depending on the capacity that you have. You'll need to be aware with VCP the differences with the file systems, because with 5 and 5.1, I think it was, they introduced VMFS 5, which allows I think it's 1 meg block size, which essentially means everything else that you used to have with VMS3 and before, which had the different sizes, which constrained the maximum physical size of the data store. That's kind of gone out the window now. So and with 5.5, which is more to do with the VMs, but with 5.5, so I'll recap. With 5.1, your data store, your limits there, you can go up to, I think it's 62 terabytes, something like that. And that was the data stores, but that wasn't the VMs themselves. But with 5.5, you now can do the same with the VMs as well. And that's something that some people I've seen have been caught out on, where they saw the sort of 5.1 and, oh great, that means I can have a huge VM. No, you couldn't. You need 5.5 for that. And you do get questions on that. You'll get questions on what will happen if I update VMFS 3 to 5. Will the block size change or that kind of thing? Will it affect a running VM? What are the limits to that? Can I go up to 2 terabytes? Those kinds of things you're going to get questions on. I need to slow down and breathe here, I think. Okay, where are we up to? Oh yes, right. So some of the other questions you get with regards to data stores. When you're provisioning data stores, you'll sometimes get, you need to know if a data store has been provisioned, because the VCP doesn't assume that you are the master of your own universe either, at least in my experience from studying it as well as taking the exam. It will assume in some cases that you are not the storage guys. You're getting LUNs provisioned to you, and therefore you have to troubleshoot if you don't get the LUN you're expecting, and it will ask you questions on that. So you might have asked your storage guys, okay guys, I need a LUN of X size, and then it will say, okay, you've asked for this, but you haven't got it. What can you do to remedy that? And it will obviously give you options to look at that. And obviously you need to look at the differences between rescanning and refreshing the data stores and the differences that does. You'll also get questions on, now this is going to memory, the IDs, they're kind of like MAC addresses, but they're not, with fiber channel. So even if you don't use fiber channel, you're iSCSI or NFS only, you'll need to know the addressing and what addressing is valid and what isn't. You'll get questions on that, so you don't have to go super crazy on the fiber channel. I don't use fiber channel, but you need to know those basics. You also need to be aware of how fiber channel does its pathing. You need to be aware of, doing this from recap now. Oh yes, things like, think about if you use iSCSI, jumbo framing. What are the defaults there? When you're doing jumbo framing, you're going to set the MTU to 9,000. That's kind of a standard thing. You might get a question on that, about how that works, how it would affect what you're doing, is it a performance enhancement or not. Those kinds of things are worth looking at and reviewing. I mean, going back to, let's go back over here a second. I have the RAT. I'm just trying to find the, because I have the blueprint. Here we go. Trying to find it now. Bear with me. Okay, yeah, so going back here, looking, you can see here the things to bear in mind. And the blueprint's a great reference place. Don't ignore it. It's good if you're not sure or you're not sure you've covered enough areas. The blueprint is really important to make sure that you haven't missed anything, or if you know that you're weak on an area, SWOT up on it, gen up on it. I knew where my weaknesses were. If you get hold of mock exams, practice exams, that kind of thing, wherever they are online. I mean, there are lots of them out there. Some of them are more out of date. I wouldn't necessarily say they were invalid. Obviously, they might be invalid in terms of the exact content that you'll get with seating VCP 550, but what it will help identify is if you've got any areas that are weak. So, you might be really great on storage or administrating the client and the hypervisor, but your networking might be poor. It's important to identify those areas so that when you get questions on that, you can nail them. As I understand how the exam works, you need to be good across all the disciplines that you're presented with. So if you're really hot on one and really crap on another, you're going to struggle to get a good score. And that's really important to remember. You'll get questions on, where are we now? Actually, I need to go back to my document here. Sorry about this. So we'll just move on progressively. I wasn't expecting to show my screen, so this has kind of thrown me, so sorry about this, guys. Okay, so let's move on to this. Virtual switches. So what is a virtual switch? Well, as we can see on the document there, a virtual switch allows a single host to communicate with one another on the same protocols as the physical switches. If you're familiar with virtual switches in ESXi, then you know this is sort of teaching you to suck eggs. It's important to know the differences between a standard and a distributed switch, and of course where they become available in the licensing model. So you know your distributed switches are not available at the lower tiers, so you need to be aware of that. You do get questions on how to migrate. That's important, and I don't use distributed switches a lot, so that for me personally that was a weakness. I had to gen up on that. Need to be aware of, in fact there's quite a lot of questions on that I found with switching, the standard switching, and of course it's what holds it together, so that's kind of an expectation really that you would have if you really think about it. You need at least one NIC, of course, but do what the other port groups and that, or other virtual switches that you have on your host require NICs? No, they don't. You just need the one to manage it. You can choose to set it up however you want after that. You can even mix and match your standard switch with a distributed switch if you want. Lots of use cases for that. I'm certainly not going to get into a discussion about that. That's not my forte. I know that some people like to use distributed switches for certain components and standard switches for others. Some people swear by distributed switches and other people avoid them like the plague. It's whatever you're comfortable with. There are different features that are available in the distributed switch that are not available though in the standard switch. That's something that you will also get quizzed on. You'll get questions on troubleshooting. You'll get questions on beacon probing, things like that. You'll get questions on, I don't think they go too heavily on iSCSI really in terms of whether you're doing port bindings for multipathing, but it's worth looking at anyway. Now I'm thinking off the top of my head. I'll pause it just there for a second. Oh yeah, that's something that comes up quite regularly. If you've ever used distributed switches and you're unfamiliar or you're learning and you screw it up, my initial reaction many years ago when I first did it was, oh crap, I've broken it. But you can simply just reset it from the DC UI on the ESXi host itself. So you have to go to the server, log in, and sort that out. And that's great. You need to know that. That's something important. You do get quizzed on that. Okay, something else that's new, not so much new with 5.5, but is the web client. I did find a useful resource here, although upon second reading I think possibly some of the content's out of date or inaccurate, but it's worth a look anyway. It basically links, you can see here if you can see the page, a guy has made some effort April last year to, or is it a little bit later than that, to compare the differences and the features that are available within the web client and what is not. And that's something you also need to be aware of. There are things that you can do, or rather you cannot do, in the FAT client or the C# client as it's called, that you can only do in the web client. Certainly, like with the new, the fact that you can now grow your VMs from, let's say you've got a maximum limited VMDK 2 terabytes, and it's a file server or a database, and you want to grow it. You haven't got it it's not RDM or anything like that, you can now grow it. But you can only do that inside the web client. You'll get questions like that. So as I've got down there at the bottom, the new functionality can only be performed in the web client, such as resizing the VMDK. There are other things. I didn't see a question come up on this, but I've heard it can. The web client's now supported on Mac OS X, which it wasn't before. That's important to know. More and more Mac users out there. Drag and drop functionality. You've now got filters. I mean, these I'm just essentially listing here that the improved features in 5.5. Those are things you need to be aware of. With the changes, don't want to dwell on it too heavily. I think someone like Chris Wall did a great review of the changes from 5.1 to 5.5, talking about how they took out all the animations and everything was just a lot quicker, a lot better. Although still speaking to lots of people, they're struggling to migrate off of the C# client and into the web client. But VMware are very keen. I think it's very evident that the fact that you can only do certain things in the web client, you're going to have to get in there and get used to using it, even if it's uncomfortable for a while. And there are actually still only features in the C# client. I think things like SRM are only in the C# client, although I could be wrong. Is that correct, Greg, with SRM?
Yeah, SRM's still only in, I think SRM is one of the last ones that are still stuck in the C# client. Maybe one or two others, but SRM is probably the biggest one, or at least the one that gets the most. Yeah, most attention.
Cool. Okay. That's just an example there. So try and be aware of what features are available in both. But obviously with 5.5 now, they're putting more impetus on us going over to the web client. So it's kind of like whether you like it or not, it's coming. We've all known it's coming for the last year or two. You're going to get questions on it. I haven't seen any direct questions on, how do you do this in the web client, but it's coming. There are things out there, so get genned up on it. So if you don't like it, sorry, you've got to get used to it. I'm saying that to myself because I'm not a huge fan, or at least I don't find it particularly comfortable, but you need to dive in and get used to it. So yeah, there we go.
Especially 5.5 is going to be the last version with the C# client. So
there we go. Yeah, so it's
you really need to learn.
Okay. I haven't got any notes specifically on the virtual machines. So I've already spoken about. So your virtual machines, you do get questions. I can do this from memory now because you get quite a lot of quizzing on this. You'll get questions on how you deploy them, templates. You need to be familiar with what constitutes a VM and all of the files that make that up. You'll get lots of different files. If you've ever looked in your data store where your VMs are housed inside the folder, there are lots of different files. You need to know what they are. You will get asked that. You also need to be aware in the deployment process, it'll ask you in one sense troubleshooting. Although it's multiple choice questioning that you get, the scenarios it will give you will essentially give you the options of how you're going to go and troubleshoot that. So it will say, oh, okay, you've done X, Y, and Z and it's not working. What did you do wrong, or is there something wrong? Does it not support it, or those kinds of questions, like Server 2012 is now supported in the more recent versions where it wasn't before. That kind of thing is worth bearing in mind. You'll get questions about, oh, this VM won't vMotion. Why won't it vMotion? Or you've put your hosts in maintenance mode, but it's not evacuating. You'll get questions on that. So I'm kind of more going back to the host thing, but it's kind of a tie into the VMs. So things like DRS and HA, you're going to get questions on. So when you put your hosts in maintenance mode and it doesn't automatically evacuate the VMs, why doesn't it? What do you need to go and look for? Where do you need to go and look for? You do get questions on where the log files reside and which log files are pertinent to that. Sorry, can you still hear me? I had a bit
Yeah,
of a weird...
yeah,
Yeah,
we're still
cool.
hearing you.
Okay.
Perfectly.
So yeah, you'll get questions on that. You'll get questions on with HA and how that works. Not so much on slot sizes, but things to be aware of like that. You need to be aware of certainly how it tackles things like EVC and CPU steppings, that kind of thing. So, and it'll ask you simple questions like, I'm just purely doing this from an example that I can think of in my head. You might have a couple of hosts with an AMD processors and a couple of hosts with Intel processors. What could be a problem there? That might be the kind of question you'll get, because you can't vMotion between two different CPU types. So that's the kind of thing you need to be aware of. VMware treats very much as sort of the fundamentals. And again, for a lot of you guys, that's just going to be like, yeah, know this, so what? But you need to know it. Don't avoid the simple things, because those are the ones, when I did countless practice exams, you kind of end up getting obsessed, or at least I did, with the bits that you're weak on, and then you end up kind of getting potentially sloppy on the stuff you know, but you kind of just rush through it because you're too busy thinking about the stuff that you're not so sure on. It's good to know that and drill it into yourself. So, yeah, that's that, can't do that, or yeah, you can do that, but I'd have to do that, or you'll get questions on, for instance, going back to the CPU thing. I know I'm meandering a bit here, but you'll get questions with regards to the update manager and setting the profiles on that, and how you get like either the most amount of updates with regards to CPUs, or like if you want, you get questions on how do you set your profiles for that with regards to whether you want to have the newest processors or not. Those are kinds of questions you get. Host profiles, going back to that, you will get questions on that. So it's not just a licensing issue, it'll also ask you about when you're trying to deploy host profiles, why did or didn't it work? What else is there? There was a question.
For HA and DRS, the book does go into probably a lot more depth than you have to know for the VCP, but I'd highly recommend doing Frank Dinnerman and Duncan Epping's book around vSphere plus doing an HA and DRS. You probably don't need to know all of it. I'd recommend reading all of it, but if you just do a lot of the intro chapters and you don't go into real intricacies of it, I think that gives you a really good idea and sets you up pretty well also if you're looking at doing the DCA in the future. Both those resources are really, really good. The guys go over a lot of stuff, and they start off in basic terms and do go deeper and deeper. So I'd recommend that to anybody looking to learn that kind of piece.
I actually found that the 5.1 book, it was, even though it was excellent and very a good deep dive, it wasn't a hard read. So if anyone's put off by the fact that the word deep dive, perhaps it's actually really good, and it explains some fairly complex and difficult to explain subject matter in a really sort of, for me, I sometimes have to reread things several times before I sort of the penny drops. So it's a really great resource for that, for me personally. Okay. Going back, so I brought up the blueprint there. You can see some of the different focuses there on networking. Now, the reason I've gone back there, you get a lot of questions on the networking, and a lot of it's to do with troubleshooting. So it might give you examples of, okay, user A is complaining about bad performance, or your customer is complaining because peak times or off-peak times things are really slow. And it will ask you, what do you do? Where do you go to look for that? You need to be familiar with where to look, not just on the host, but also in vCenter. And you need to differentiate that as well. There are questions on that. So, it might, the right answer might be, okay, I need to go into the DCUI and do blah, 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 blah. But 9 times out of 10, it's a lot more simple, the answer that they're looking for. You do get a few questions thinking about it now. I'm thinking about the DCUI on ESX top and being familiar with how that works and the numbering on that when you're looking at it. They don't go bananas on it, so don't get too stressed on it, but you do get 1 or 2 questions on that, so it's worth genning up on that a bit as well. Okay, how are we doing for time? I'm not doing too bad, I think. Okay, yeah, networking still. I'm trying to skim over this. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder. But you get questions a lot on the networking side, talking about VLANs, PVLANs. Not so much on the configuration maximums anymore. I'm sure most people are aware. With VCP-4 on that, you used to. There was a lot of focus on the exams on the configuration maximums for VMware. That's pretty much out the window now. So if you've got any of those exam cram books which hammer into you all the various maximums and limitations and this and that, it's not such a big deal anymore. You do need to know some. Example would be, you know, what's the maximum number of ports, or if I max out the number of ports, what does that mean? Do I have to reboot the host? Yes, you do. Or rather, if you change the number of ports, that's the kind of questions you're going to get now. Not so much on the, you know, oh, I can have, you know, 50 bazillion CPUs on here. They're not so much fussed about that anymore. It's more about how it works and what the implications are for switching something on or off, or how to troubleshoot it. And that's kind of more the experience I had with it. You get questions going back to vCenter. You'll get general questions on what linking vCenter can give you. What happens if you're not getting any communication there? You get questions on iSCSI. I mean, I'm just going through the blueprint here very similarly, just going from my experience. You'll get questions on chat and how that works. You'll get questions on the different types of iSCSI initiators. So you can, you know, by default you can use the software initiator, but if you've got physical cards that you can use, you need to be aware of the differences and how that responds to it, whether you can or can't enable different things, that kind of thing. Moving on down now. I trust I'm keeping this as general as possible, Greg, by the way. I don't want to go too heavy on anything. Okay.
I mean, go deep as you want. I mean, if people cover again portions, not a problem. So
okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, yeah, I'm just trying to sort of. I don't want to get an angry email from one of the guys that, yeah, cheers.
No.
Basically,
no. As I said, the more information people, the better. I don't think anyone's upset about that.
I'm trying to sort of make it pertinent to my experience and the questions that I had. So if I'm skipping over details, it's purely because I'm trying to communicate to you guys what you should be genning up on, because there'll be lots of components and features and different things that this product does that I, in my experience, just didn't come up in the exam. So, you know, in one sense that's a relief, in another sense you're like, huh? Yeah, you'll get questions on resource pools. That's something I haven't discussed. Resource pools and how they work and how they affect one another. If you've got nested resource pools, what the components are of the resource pools, what you can have in there, what you can't have in there. You'll get questions on, in fact, sometimes some of the questions are deliberately ambiguous. I found, so read the question. Oh my God, I need to underline that really. You should put big black letters with red flashing lights. Read the question and read the answers, because some of the answers I've seen with any of the questions, not just what I've got listed on the page here, I found a lot of the times you'll find that a couple or even 3 of the answers will look like, yeah, that could answer it. But you need to reread it. And I know that sounds obvious, but when you sat down, you're in the exam, you're feeling under pressure, and you're like, and you're kind of skimming it because you think you haven't got enough time. Trust me, you've got enough time. That's not going to be an issue for you. The issue that will catch you out will be not reading the question properly. And the reason I say that from experience is because I did, I don't know, hundreds of mock exams. using different tools just to put myself through the discipline of reading the question, reading the answers that they give you, and making sure that you choose the right one, because more often than not they are worded extremely similarly. So if you're in a hurry, or if you're used to question A being answer A, and then they happen to shift it and you're not reading it, you'll get caught out, and that won't be because you didn't know it, it's just simply because you weren't paying attention. So if one thing, that's just a little tip from my experience. Going back to the resource pools, yeah, you get questions on that, how that works, how it affects things, what you can do to troubleshoot it. So if you've got a VM that's constrained, or you want to add reservations, those kinds of things. Some of the questions were quite interesting actually, and I would hazard a guess that I would argue with VMware on some of their answers, but it's important that you know what they're looking for. Some of the answers that they were expecting you, I was like, huh? you do it that way, really? And you might come across that yourself, and that's not just in the resource pool aspects, there might be in other bits and pieces. So where you are thinking that, if you're expecting, if I've got this problem, I would do X, and that's how you do it in the real world, but VMware might be saying, well, actually, no, that's not what we're expecting from you. So it's a little bit Microsofty, where it's not necessarily the wrong answer, but it's the answer that they want from you. So that's something to bear in mind, and you can generally find that stuff out online, especially when you're doing some of the online mock exams. I think there's Simon Long does his exams online, the Slog blog, I think it is. A little bit out of date, but it gives you great insight into the kind of questions, or the subject matter rather, and how they want you to answer the questions, excuse me, and what they're looking for from that. I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, but thinking about how you approach the exam, and thinking that, okay, if you're a regular, because I know there are lots of fantastic administrators out there with a wealth of knowledge who don't have their VCP, and you'll get presented with questions, and you'll know the answer, what the answer is, and you know exactly what you're supposed to do in the real world, but that is not what VMware are looking for. In some cases, I wouldn't say all cases, but in some cases I've been surprised at the answer they're looking for. So that's just something to bear in mind there. Okay, going back, I didn't see any questions personally on VMware Converter. I can see it listed there. So P to V, that kind of thing. There might be some. I didn't come across any personally. What else is there? Just quickly skim down. I'm trying to keep this nice and light. They didn't seem to go, oh yes, in terms of your virtual machines there, cloning and templates, you will get asked on where you would use it and what options are available to you and what aren't when you attempt to do that. You'll get questions on OVF files, where you get them, how you use them, how you deploy them. What else have we got here? They didn't go too crazy on sys prepping or anything like that, so I know that that's one of the great things about deploying VMs. They didn't seem to go mad on that from what I saw. Oh yes, be aware of all of the new features. So you can see on the screen there, it's talking about USB pass-through and those kinds of things. It might ask you questions on, can you use your CD writer on your workstation, passing through to a VM on there, can you or can't you? Well, yes you can, but it's stuff like that to be aware of, little features that you might not even be aware of. It's good to know what's now available, so it might be worth having a quick look at the new feature sets, because you do get questions on it. I did notice with 5.5 as well, they're obviously talking about some of the new features. I know it's the wrong product name, but I call it vFlash because that's how I first saw it. But it's their new flash acceleration product that comes, I think it's Enterprise Plus and above. You'll get some questions on that and how it talks about how it does its storage pooling, that kind of thing. Excuse me. Moving down. Didn't get too many questions on SDRS, if you're familiar with that. Oh, you'll get questions going there talking about HA and DRS. You'll get questions on, let's think about this. Yeah, if you get things that bear, weird and wonderful occurrences where you might have, so let's say you've got a cluster of 8 nodes and 4 of them become isolated from the other 4, but they're still good to go. What then happens? Does everything break? Does it throw its toys out the pram? Those are things to be aware of. How HA and DRS respond to that, how vCenter responds to that. Questions on fault tolerance, how fault tolerance works, what happens if fault tolerance dies, what are the requirements for fault tolerance as well. What else is there? Going back to HA and the clusters. I got sidetracked there with fault tolerance. Now I've gone dead in my head. Yeah, moving on. DRS, affinity rules, anti-affinity rules. Didn't see really any questions on that. Need to be aware of, I didn't see any questions on this, but it's something worth bearing in mind. I think I saw 1 or 2 practice test questions concerning if you fit hosts with different RAM sizes, what would happen, those kinds of things to bear in mind. So very generic, general design stuff. So while it's not a design exam, it does poke you a little bit in that direction and says, okay, you've got your cluster and you've got 3 hosts and it's got X RAM or it's got this many NICs and stuff. What do you know about it, kind of thing. It's worth knowing that. You don't have to be VCDX or anything like that, but you need to know how the components fit together at the very least. Let's think about other questions that we had. I don't think I got any questions on monitoring so much that I can remember. You do get some questions on admission control, but again, it didn't go bananas, certainly in my experience. Yeah, there's fault tolerance. Definitely there are questions on that. So I know it's not massively used, but you're going to get questions on it, so gen up on it. Where are we here? Oh, there we go. You can see you've got questions there on vFlash resources for VMDKs, that kind of thing, which is what I was alluding to earlier. I think, oh yeah, you will get, now going back to DRS, how you set the slider, whether you set it to aggressive or in the middle, what defaults are and what effects that has in your environment, you're going to get questions like that. Swap file locations, that's something that does come up. And going back to something that I said earlier, which I kind of did very lightly, you do get quite a lot of questions on, it'll ask you, okay, you're troubleshooting X, and it will list 5 or 6 different files, log files, and it will ask you which of these is pertinent to this issue that you're looking for. So you need to know those, and there are quite a few. I found that personally a little bit more challenging, but you kind of get used to it. But that's something you'll need to know. So even if you're not used to going into the DCUI or SSHing in and having a dig around, if that's not something you're comfortable with, doesn't matter, they're still going to ask you questions on it. So you need to know at least what files you need to look for. How are we doing for time, Greg? Do I need to pause for breath here, or do we need to carry on?
You've still got 10 minutes, so...
Okay. I wasn't sure if you... Okay, cool. All right. Okay. I didn't see very much on data protection, I'm afraid. I know that's in the blueprint. That doesn't mean it's not going to be there, but I didn't see very much on it. You do... yeah, I didn't see very much on that at all, to be honest. Although perhaps one of the future guys can elaborate rather, if they came across anything like that. Host profiles, yes, you're going to get questions on that. Again, as I said before, licensing, be aware of that. It's only available in certain things. You'll get questions on that as well. Auto deploy. This is something that they do ask questions on, which for me was a little bit of a surprise, because I thought, auto deploy seems to be a bit more of a fancy thing. But you do get questions on it. What are the requirements for auto deploy? So, I need a DHCP server and a TFTP server, that kind of thing. It'll ask you questions like that. So even if you don't use auto deploy, never plan to use auto deploy, you still need to know it. You still need to know how it works. You don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of deploying it yourself, but you need to know the working components to it, and also components like VIBs and how you put them together. Again, it's not a massive deep dive into it, but they'll ask you questions on that. So that's important that you get in there. There's some great material online with regards to auto deploy as well if you're not really, if you don't have any exposure to it. So it's worth taking a look. Troubleshooting, yeah. Now, I was quite surprised how much troubleshooting they managed to cram into a multiple choice exam. I know that the higher level exams like the DCA and that, it's more visual and they expect you to fix things there, but you actually get presented with pictures, and it will say, you can see X, this host has got this message, what's wrong? How do I fix that? What do I need to look for? One question comes to mind, you've added a new NIC, but it's not listed. Why is it not listed? That kind of thing. So there's quite a lot of troubleshooting in there in the exam. It seems that for me it was quite networky based troubleshooting, and again I'm not particularly surprised because a lot hinges on that, even if it's just internally on the host, on the standard switches or the distributed switches. So you need to gen up on that definitely, on your troubleshooting skills, knowing how they work. Not so much massively in depth, but if you've got a VM on one switch and the other one on another one, and they're not connected or whatever, it'll ask you, well, why can't they talk to one another? Or if they're on the same switch, can they talk to one another? Or if they're on different VLANs, you'll get questions on VLANs, on the switches as well. I'm kind of hopping from subject to subject here. I'm just kind of going from my mind here. Right. I think I'm running out here now, Greg, to be honest, mate. I don't want to rehash what I've already covered too
much.
Right.
I mean, we've got 5 minutes left, so it's not a problem. Thanks for that, Simon. That was really good. And that covers off, as you say, largely what it is, a high-level view of it. Also, Simon said we've got another. Let me have a look. Check this.
4 or 5 sessions, I think.
Yeah, so we've got another couple of sessions. So that is actually my fault for not being prepared. Yeah, so we got another couple of sessions around the VCP track. So our idea was, and almost what Simon also touched on, is a lot of the VCP stuff that's on the vBrownBags and out there at the moment is unfortunately a little bit old, because most people, or at least most of the people that have been presented on the vBrownBags, did the VCP 5 when it kind of came out. And now, obviously, we've upgraded to VCP 5.5. So we thought we would do a VCP track to try and cover what's new and what's going on in there. So, yeah, we've got, obviously, Simon today. Then we've got the ES6i requirements, install config and authentication, introduction to vCenter, install config, SSO, SQL, introduction to storage, virtual machine management, HNDRS, Firehose, and yeah, and then we possibly are then moving on to a VCAC one. But we do have a whole VCP track, so that's going to be 6. My math is correct. Of going over it, trying to give people new ideas. If people have stuff we want to add more, or think we're missing stuff, then yeah, let us know. We're just trying to, hopefully, we've noticed a lot of people are downloading VCP stuff, and obviously the VCP ones we did were a couple of years ago now, so they are beneficial, but there is new things like SSO etc. that was never in the original vSphere 5, hence why it was never covered. So yeah, hopefully people find it interesting, and yeah, I think a lot of people, even if you've got your VCP but maybe you haven't touched 5.5 yet, hopefully these videos will be beneficial to people. Cool. Thanks for that, Simon. That was really good. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. And yeah, join us next week where we will be going over ESXi requirements, install, config, authentication with David Stamen. I really hope I said David's surname correctly. Apologies if I didn't. I'm prone to that. I'm South African, so that's my excuse. But yeah, join us next week. We'll be going over ESXi requirements, install, config, and authentication. And thanks again, Simon. That was really good. And yeah, have a good evening.
Thank you.